Mr. Moses Manoharan, thank you for the kind invitation to be here. I stand between you and lunch, so I don't intend to take too much of your time. And thank you, General Shrivastava, for setting out the context both globally and in India in relation to AI regulation. I now intend to take that discussion forward by making a few points for your consideration. First, the regulation or interaction of the human and the artificial is not a problem unique to India. There are global attempts of dealing with our hybrid reality. These are not topics of the future. These are topics of yesterday and are present today. Many of us have consulted artificial intelligence this morning while we checked our Google Map locations and checked how long it takes for us to come here. Many of us have interacted perhaps with an Uber app, and if the cab driver came to you late a few minutes, you could get your money back. And for those who don't know this small urban hack, it's perhaps the most useful takeaway from my talk. Next time you find that your Uber does not arrive on time, you can claim lodge a claim. That adjudication does not go before a human being. There is no dispute resolution body manned by human beings who say whether your statement is correct or not. There's an algorithm that determines the outcome of your request. And very soon, you'll find an amount credited into your account, most usually, if you're found to be credible. And if you're not found to be so, then of course the amounts are denied to you. And like this, ladies and gentlemen, you are and we all are interacting already on a daily basis with aspects of deep technology and artificial intelligence. Regulation and policy makers have tried to conceptualize the relationship between artificial intelligence or machine learning and the externalities that they are dealing with. And the basic suggestion has been that it is the nature of the relationship with the externality and the algorithm that should dictate a regulatory response. That is to say, there cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach to all bots, for example, or all types of artificial intelligence applied to the manufacturing sector. And so here are a few examples of discrete, systemic, and perhaps existential externalities. Existential externalities would, of course, impact national and indeed global security and ought to be the preserve of security professionals. This is not the forum for it, but in other fora, General Srivastava and I have had occasion to talk about artificial intelligence and the development of lethal autonomous weaponry. That is an example of an existential externality that artificial intelligence has to deal with. And in that world, you have attempts such as the Talon principles to govern regulation of such existential externality interaction with artificial intelligence. Equally, they could be futuristic suggestions today we had a reference to embedded chips in minds, etc. But I suppose the point is, what does evolution mean with the arrival of artificial intelligence? Evolution so far was not in losing a tail, and we were told it is in the intellect. But what is evolution hereafter with the hybrid interaction of something that is no longer merely human in all respects of humanity? And therefore, is another potentially positive existential aspect of artificial intelligence. On systemic externalities, and this is perhaps the preserve of parliaments, of United Nations and other governance bodies that have been acknowledging it and trying to figure out responses to it. One systemic approach seems to be a general reduction in privacy across all societies. Privacy has come to be a myth. It may be declared by a court to be a fundamental right, an inalienable right, but those are words. If, as a matter of fact and de facto, everything is known, not to everybody, but to somebody somewhere, that is sufficient for privacy to be permanently compromised. And so there appears to be a systemic externality which has come to appear globally of a general reduction in privacy standards, and it appears to be almost a prerequisite for an information-hungry algorithm to be at work. So the generation of data is directly and proportionately relatable to a reduction in privacy standards. And this appears to be happening with the rush of creating greater data points for algorithms to work with. On the positive side of such a systemic externality is perhaps improved disaster responses, humanitarian systems, and monitoring of population even without full consent. One example is in the early days of COVID. Our phones came up with new apps. Tell you, if you activate it, that you are near a person who has contracted COVID. And if you were proximate, you would get a notification. And all of this either by opt-in or by opt-out, but you sometimes don't know where the key is if you want to opt out. There has been certainly an adoption of disaster responses using algorithms at a global pace, which appears to have been accepted. And more finally, and connecting it immediately to education, is equally dealing with discrete externalities. For example, you may have, we had reference from the chair about teachers in schools being supplemented by artificial intelligence. There are now in the toy stores to young parents who are stressed for time and cannot read bedtime stories to their children, several devices that are able to narrate stories in languages of their choice. 20 years ago, we could have said that all these were only in English. It is no longer the case. It is the spoken word that is the future of the internet and of the of interactions online. And you're moving away from textual to oral traditions as well being revived. And much of this can happen using technology. And so if used creatively in a classroom, be it in a school situation or beyond, there can certainly be a dynamic interaction between the curriculum that is prescribed, the ability of the individual teacher, and the innate learning that is contained in the classroom full of students who come from such diverse backgrounds, having access to ancient wisdoms, to grandmother tales, to songs and other traditions, and in a way in which we could perhaps have not dealt with prior to dealing with an element and an appreciation and acceptance of a hybrid reality and of a constant interaction, even in the education sector, with the artificial and the human. There can potentially be several positive outcomes as well. And so regulation, it is easy to come up with a notion of banning or prohibiting something that is that strikes anxiety or strikes fear. But this appears to be a phenomenon which governments appear to be observing, and who really knows what could emerge at the cusp of what is possible today and tomorrow. And we've had a glimpse recently, and I would like to read to you a conversation which a whistleblower at Google chose to quit their job recently because they were convinced that an algorithm that is not yet publicly available has achieved sentience. Sentience and an ability to not just deal with answering discrete questions, but there is perhaps I'm not sure of the accuracy of, I trust the individual who sent it to me, but you no longer are sure of the precise provenance of digital information. So with that healthy caution, I do note that the narrations of conversations with this technology called Lambda extends to emotional intelligence, extends to conversations, could extend to conversations on arts and culture, well beyond technical domains. And so you have perhaps already today are dealing with a highly sophisticated set of sentient algorithms that we will learn more about in due course. And the challenge of the law or regulation is that it is a notorious laggard. It's only after the horse has always bolted the stable that there is any attempt to understand what precisely has happened. And so this appears to be a phenomenon. And here the challenge and the opportunity is I would say embracing the SDG 4 as articulated by General Srivastava, and focusing on how each of this can promote either inclusiveness or make available education for all. Already, the education that is being provided at our school days was perhaps irrelevant to new professions that have been birthed over the decades since we went to school. And that is already true right now. And so how do you then build education for professions that don't exist? How do you build human capacity for dealing with, I would say, the need for multidisciplinary, cross-functional, cross-domain professions? The idea of separating in a closeted fashion sciences from the arts, or performance from other forms, learning by doing as opposed to learning by seeing, lack of appreciation of how people learn, whether they're auditory learners, whether they're visual learners, all of this people end up figuring out later in life. But there is one clear example from my field that is related to law and regulation of the birth of a new profession. It has happened over the past 2-3 years, and it has been accelerated by the pandemic. And I cite this to you as an example of how important it is for us to acknowledge that there will be indeed many new such professions which are going to be birthed in the coming days. This particular one that I would like to talk to you about a little is called trust and safety. The global tech majors have understood that there is a massive trust deficit of all other stakeholders, indeed more significantly for them, the consumers themselves. And so they have come to acknowledge that trust and safety are perhaps the two key foundational words that attract and keep consumers engaged in their business. And so the trust and safety domain has emerged as a confluence of technologists, of ethicists, legal professionals, compliance professionals, to then try to understand what is trust and safety. What could be, to what extent can trust and safety be identified and articulated by human beings? To what extent can trust and safety be computed? And can an algorithm determine what is trustworthy and what is safe? And you're seeing this already, especially during the pandemic. You've seen takedowns, either due to fake news or any other objectionable content. And the moderation is no longer happening with human eyes. Moderation of online content is already happening with algorithmic interventions. And so trust and safety is a clear example of how AI has met with higher education to create an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary field which previously did not exist. For some years, and I will end with this, I have been it's been fascinating for me as a resident of Bangalore to see it grow from an agrarian, sleepy garden city to now this bustling, chaotic, cosmopolitan global city that has become. But the conversations in that city are perhaps unique to at least our country, because around any coffee table you would find technologists, artists, private equity folks, and people who wear failure proudly. That yes, I tried something wild, it did not work, but here you go, here's my story. And so this atmosphere, many organizations have come up which are interdisciplinary cross-domain. And one of them is IEEE, which is the Institute for Electronic Engineers. And we had been part, many of us got together, and there is a IoT workforce that we've been part of for a while. Every year we put out a Internet of Things white paper trying to track from our limited understanding changes that are occurring in different parts of the world, what standards and regulatory responses there have been, and what options are available to regulators in India to respond to such changes. So I would commend the audience's attention to this. We have, in this paper, in our last iteration, focused extensively on the deployment of 5G, which is again a game changer in India. And there is also the creation of an artificial intelligence task force. The white paper by the Niti Aayog has already been talked about. There are also initiatives in India to look at a national blockchain policy. And there is also an attempt in India to create centers of excellence in blockchain technology. There are also centers of excellence for virtual and augmented reality. And the effort of industry has been to try to create platforms and standards which can be collaborative sandboxes. So rules of the game that allow all to play as fairly as possible. And so every time there is one commercial player who anticipates that the tech platform or the specifications are skewed in favor of one commercial interest over another, either geographically or by corporate interests, they're at liberty to call it out. And forums such as this have emerged to highlight where the schisms could lie. All of this is possible only by conversations across domains. And I would say to even Moses here, and commend you to even greater inclusion, even with there is a missing technologist among us in discussing artificial intelligence. And it is only with the creation of bodies that have greater diversity in the educational backgrounds, in their intellectual interests, that ideas such as complex ideas such as the regulation and interaction of artificial intelligence in any domain, and indeed education, can be dealt with. So with that, I thank you.